You have accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, everyone, to episode number 137 of the podcast of OA. I am Myron Rumsey, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by my good buddy, Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how are you?
I'm good, Myron. Everything's great over here in St. Louis. Just want to say hello to all the fellow Lanterns out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, we were talking about how we've got a number of listeners from all over the place, and we keep hearing from people from all over the world. You know, last episode we talked to, we read an email from Argentina. So,
I know, it's really interesting. I just sometimes that just blows my mind. You know, I mean, to think about somebody across the globe listening to your podcast, it's flattering, but it's appreciative. You know, it's an honor. It's really cool.
Absolutely. I appreciate anybody who takes the time out of their day to let us be a part of their fan experience. So, you know, I'm always very humbled by that. So this episode, we've got the new issue of the Green Lantern to talk about. It's kind of the midway point to season 1. But before we start doing some comic chat and maybe a couple other things, you were saying off mic that you were catching up with books, and you've been reading some of the books that have some of the other Earth Lanterns in it. So, you thought it might be a good idea to talk about what some of our other favorite ring wearers are doing these days.
Yeah. Well, it's just you keep everybody up to date on what's going on, because I know not a lot of us have the time to read all the titles. I mean, I have so many titles that are on my read that I've already put on my iPad that are ready to read, but you just hardly ever get the time, and it gets tougher as you get older. So you find yourself kind of dropping titles here and there and everything, but the Lanterns I've always stuck with. So I was like, half the time I'll read a title just for a Lantern, and just like Titans, and while we're on the subject, that's where Kyle Rayner's is on the Titans title. And the only reason I picked it up was because Kyle Rayner was in it. And I thought it'd be a good idea.
What's Kyle been doing over there?
I haven't read the last 2 issues, but I know that I haven't read that one in a while. I haven't got caught up on that one. Justice League Odyssey was the one I wanted to get caught up on. Jessica Cruz is over there. Now, it's interesting what's taking place as opposed to what's going on in the regular Justice League title, because over in Justice League Odyssey now, they're in this place called the Ghost Sector, and it's outside time and space, and they're tracking down Darkseid. But I've been focused on Jessica Cruz primarily because I'm interested in her character, and it's kind of interesting. But the last probably four issues or so they didn't really reflect on her anxiety, and I think that's what's an integral part of her characterization and why people have grown to admire her so much. And with that said, the last couple of issues that I just read today, it did kind of finally extrapolate a little bit on her fear of losing the ring and becoming her normal self again, which is if readers are familiar with her character, she's claustrophobic, and she becomes really, really anxious, and she closes in on herself, and she wants to be left alone, and she locks herself in her room, and it's really, really interesting though, and I like her character for that sake alone, and that's pretty much why I've stuck with Odyssey through the whole thing, because just for Jessica Cruz.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns. I think we talked about it a few episodes ago about, with her being in a team book where she's got so many other people around her, will the writer remember to focus on that, because it is such a key part of her character?
It really is, and I think what gets lost in the shuffle of what people consider diverse comics these days is everybody's focusing on different races when it comes to characters and different gender identities or whatnot. But what often gets overlooked is a lot of people's issues that deal with psychological disorders or anything for that matter, anxiety disorders, the list goes on. And I think a lot of those kind of traits are overlooked with a lot of comic book characters because we're always, I mean, you and I both know they've always been held to a higher standard. And, you know, hey, such and such doesn't suffer from depression, or such and such is, you know, he's cool with everything. But I mean, you and I both know that's not how the universe works, regardless if you're a comic book or not. And I think that gets overlooked, and I think that's what really makes Jessica Cruz stand out, especially as a Lantern, when it's been known to, you know, you're supposed to be able to control fear, you know, or whatnot, and I just think that's what's important about her character.
So you've been reading Justice League Odyssey. Are you reading Young Justice at all?
I haven't read any of Young Justice, and the only reason why is because I haven't picked them up yet. And but I am interested in the Teen Lantern, but I don't think she's been given a name yet, as far as I know.
I believe she has a name. I don't remember what it is. I've read it somewhere online, at least a first name, but I don't know about a last name yet. And I don't think they've really gotten too much into how did she exactly hack a power battery or Krona's gauntlet or whatever it is that she's using.
Okay. See, and that's what I'm really, really interested in when that starts coming into the story arc. I haven't seen much of Guy Gardner. I think you and I talked last time he popped up in the title. It wasn't Heroes in Crisis. I think it was that Doomsday Clock?
Yeah, he was in Doomsday Clock, the most recent issue.
Right. And then, of course, Simon Baz is nowhere to be found.
You say that very pleased with that.
I'll leave the best for last, maybe. I'll give the fans that. I mean... No, I mean, there hasn't been really any references to him or anything. It's like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm a fan enough of characters when it comes to comic books to know that I don't like it when they just take a character and just drop him off the map and don't give references to him, you know. Kind of like Sodom Yad. I remember we talked a lot about Sodom Yad, and he's always been one of my favorite Lanterns, too. And, you know, some of these characters just drop off, and there's no mention of them. I didn't know... what had happened to Azrael, you know, Jean Sebastian. I don't know if you're familiar with his character or not.
A little bit.
He's over in Justice League Odyssey, and he's a cool character, and I never knew what happened to him. And then if he shows up in Odyssey, I'm like, okay, cool, this got a little bit better for me. But as far as that goes, I that's all. I mean, I don't know what happened to Simon Baz. If anybody else out there knows, if I'm missing something, I am curious to know. I know you and I have theorized the plot of one of the Heroes in Crisis, and that he might have died in there. But again, that goes back to issue 1 when you pointed out that reference to the Green Lantern shirt on the ground.
Yeah, and there really hasn't been a follow-up to that at all. You know, I haven't read the most recent issue that came out last week, and so I haven't gotten there, but I'm sure that if something had happened and Simon was in that issue, we would have heard about it on social media or on one of the other major comic book websites. So I haven't seen anything. You know, I agree with you. I mean, you and I, we kind of jest that we don't care for the character, and you know, it's not that we don't necessarily want to see the character ground into pulp, but at the same time, he's nowhere to be found, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just that kind of baffles me that what they would do with that character. As far as John Stewart goes, he's still in the main Justice League title, which I think is still a really, really good, strong title. It's he plays a good role in that. I mean, and I've liked John Stewart and I've not liked John Stewart, but I kind of sway either way when it comes to him. Guy Gardner is the one I'm curious about. I wish they'd find a way to write him into one of the Justice League titles. I think he'd be a good fit in Justice League Dark.
That could be fun. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. It would be cool to see him bounce off of Wonder Woman. You know, that'd be kind of interesting to see what their interplay would be like. Yeah,
that could be a lot of fun depending on how they play it.
Right. So outside of that, man, that's the up-to-date news on our Earth Lanterns. I don't think I missed anybody but Hal Jordan, but everybody knows where he's at. So
yep. You know, and it's you know, to me, this whole thing kind of underscores the problem with the franchise is that it seemingly can't sustain a number of books So you've got all these characters that we've tried to build up, and it seems like there's no place for them to go. So people that really identify with one over the other are often dissatisfied, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Green Lantern fan base is so divisive.
Well, and it's still, I mean, I understand the numbers game is crucial when it comes to publishers, but I find it hard to believe there isn't a high demand for a Justice League core book. That still baffles me that there isn't a title that has them all together. I mean, I'll go back to what I said before. I've always likened the Green Lantern Corps to kind of like the Guardians of the Galaxy kind of thing. It's obviously with more characters, but they're kind of an offshoot to the DC universe, but they interconnect in certain times and places and everything. So I wish they'd make a title. I wish they'd come out with a book with all of them. And speaking of lanterns, and the Odyssey title, I don't know if you're familiar with this person or not. A lantern by the name of Topal was referenced. Topal.
Oh, I've heard the name. This is gonna stretch my memory.
I think it's a female. But I think she's dead. They referenced her in there, and they said she's dead. Let me see what. Hold on, let me go to that page because I have it right here on my iPad.
It seemed to me, I'm trying to remember. I keep thinking about her being tied in with the Legion of Superheroes somewhere along the way. Okay. I wasn't sure. They didn't say a lot. It was one little. Darkseid made a mention of her, and it was one little box. And I'm not entirely sure what he said, word for word, but it was. I know she had died, or at one point, because in the next frame they referenced her dying. Yeah, boy, the name is familiar, but it doesn't. It doesn't.
If memory serves you, I think she had a tie into Abin Sur in some way.
Yeah, I know she's an older character.
Right.
She had a really kind of a neat uniform design too.
Okay. So if anybody else out there is familiar with Topal, write in.
All right. Well, we will take a break, and then we will come back and see what happens.
All right. Sounds good, Myron.
What up, dweebs? This is Guy Gardner. You're listening to the podcast of OA.
So, Phil, it's been about a year since you joined the podcast. It was a year ago in May.
Wow. Doesn't seem like it's been that long, but it doesn't even feel like it's been. It's like went by so fast,
Well, and we are welcome with a surprise this evening. We are joined by Bill Giancoli, who was the original co-host to the podcast of OA. So, Bill, what does it feel like to be a guest now instead of being a co-host?
I don't know. I assume this is very much how Regis felt when he came back live with Kelly. So you look well, Myron. You look well. It's just great to be back. It's it's great to it was funny. Phil and I, when I got on, Phil was like, "Yeah, we never actually talked, so this is kind of interesting too." But no, it feels good to be back. To listen in on you guys and be a part of the whole podcasting experience. So it's fun. I can't believe it's been a year though. Wow, that does seem like time really flew by there.
Absolutely. And it's, we have a lot of listeners who have been with us from the very beginning. And so I do every now and then get emails from people saying, well, how's Bill doing? Hope he's doing well, and, well wishes and so on. And, I've shared that with you at work because you and I work in the same place. And, I thought, well, this is a great opportunity for you to come on the show, talk about what you're doing, because you have a new project that people can actually buy on Amazon. So for anybody who wants to read some of your work has a great opportunity to easily find it.
Right. Yeah. We're, so I, ended up working with, I'm trying to back up because this has actually been a long project. So, probably, I want to say this past summer, 2018, there was a bunch of artists and myself and a couple other writers tried all to get together to try to build like an anthology together and kind of put together a book. And it was having a little trouble getting started. Creative people and all that rot. But one artist, Jonathan Myers is his name, who has done he does a lot of great artwork. I'm trying to describe him. Remember like the Dungeons and Dragons books?
Oh yeah.
And
those.
yeah, they like that, like kind of, I don't even know how to describe the art in there, but it was like, very detailed oriented, drawings of the people, but the swashes of color were kind of like, it would almost have like a blur to it. So he does a lot of those like books for like other authors and stuff like that. And he wanted to really spearhead this, and he started going around and he started making a good collection of artists. He asked myself and Chris Bell, who we've talked to before, and Chris Bell is an artist I work with, and we just started. He's like, I wanted to create a book that's all about like monster lore and kind of like scary stories or things of that nature, to kind of put them in comic form, like 5-6 page comics, and put them all together in a book. And, I kind of was like, okay, sure. That sounds like a good thing. So before I knew it, there was a bunch of very talented artists, and, people started to come together. And, before he knew it, he was like, yeah, we have a book. And so Chris and I put in a great 6-page story. It's called Bad Neighbors. It's kind of our brand of twisted humor and great art and quirky humor that I think people would really enjoy. The whole book itself that you can get on Amazon, it's called Monster Carnival, a Comics Anthology. Again, that's Monster Carnival Comics Anthology. And there's some just beautiful artwork in there. When you like kind of even just flipping through it, it's kind of really nice. It would almost like make a good, I hate to say this, it sounds cliche, but a nice coffee table book, if you will. And yeah,
that cover looks like a lot like a Neil Gaiman cover.
Yeah, almost like the Sandman or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's Jonathan Myers to you. And kind of an interesting thing with Jonathan Myers, when you take a look at some of his artwork, I'm always kind of interesting what he does with the colors. He is colorblind. So it is, sometimes it's like, wow, I wouldn't have never imagined putting those two colors in, but he does get, assistance from his wife. Like sometimes, is that purple? And she's probably like, yeah, it's purple. But he does a great job with his like line work and everything. So he has some great art in there. There's one of the editors is Brandon Whipple. His artwork is just beautiful. It's like really cool. And he does this like strange, weird story with like gnomes and trolls, and they're all little rounded people, but the artwork is absolutely beautiful. And then we have some like Wayne Beeman does another great. His art is just, his panel work is just phenomenal. So it's a great book to check out. It's and for the price, actually, it's 153 pages, and it's going for $20 right now on Amazon. And it's beautiful. It's just great. I got my copy the other day. And, you can get it on Prime. So if you got Prime, you'll have it in 2 days flat. And they're already starting another anthology through, I believe it's Splatterhouse Press. And they're starting another anthology, but it's going to be all robots. So it'll be kind of interesting where that goes. And, sorry, Myron, I might just do a little more shameless promotion. So we're also working on our Ashes, which is a series that we've been working on that I've talked about before on the show. And we're looking to make the complete story into a book. And that's going to be hopefully out this summer. So, keep your eyes out for Ashes by myself and Chris Bell.
Yeah, a lot of the listeners may or may not remember, but you started your own imprint called Zero Comics several years ago.
Yes, Zero Comics. And, we've kind of gone away from the individual issues, just from a monetary standpoint, and just the amount of effort to do individual issues was becoming quite a bear. I know between my gaming and my, sitting around watching TV, how could I fit it in? But so sorry to turn it back around, but yeah, Monster Carnival, a comics anthology. Check it out on Amazon. It's a good read. I think people will enjoy it, and like I said, just have it in there. I will say, and I'm being critical here. If you're like, I want to be terrified, it's not terrifying, but it's cool.
Is it like Monster Squad level scares, or is it?
Yeah, I would say more Twilight Zone.
Oh, okay, all right, gotcha. And
yeah, there's monsters involved, but there's no ever sense of dread. So if you're like really like, I want to read this and just be totally like freaked out and eerie, you're not going to do that, but you will enjoy the artwork. There's a great this artist writer. His name's Doug Laura, and he's out of Binghamton, New York, and he did this piece that was kind of a almost like a spoof on Pokemon. So it was kind of like cuter monsters and stuff like that, but the art is actually really fantastic, and it's kind of a weird, strange story that I think people would really like. But again, I think more Twilight Zone and less like Tales from the Dark Side kind of thing.
Gotcha. So you were talking about Ashes a little bit, and for those that don't know Ashes from when you originally started publishing it, this is kind of the Afterlife meets The Office.
Yeah. To an extent, yeah. I would think that in a line is a good way to describe it. It's the Grim Reaper gets laid off, and he wants to get revenge on the human doctor who has cured all diseases, causing his furlough, and it's just a very along the lines of Simpsons / Family Guy kind of farce, but what we have a lot of fun with it is figures throughout history to like religious figures and everything that just kind of you find out that heaven is really just a 9 to 5 and everybody has their own kind of thing going on. No matter how they were revered in the human world, they're not necessarily revered the same way. Like Buddha is our human resources director in the agency. And it's just it's fun to play with those archetypes and kind of put them in other scenarios that you don't normally get to see. So that's about 150 some odd pages, and it's just a really fun story to write because you have the Afterlife is filled with just tons of characters that you can play with.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, so now I believe this was a Green Lantern show. I don't want to, steal the thunder, the Green Thunder, if you will. All right,
It's true.
Yeah, so, you got to catch me up on the Green Lantern lore. Is Guy Gardner still or what?
We don't know. We don't see him anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, really, he's kind of we don't see him that much.
Yeah, I mean, what is the? I mean, not to be controversial here, but I mean, at this point right now, Myron, when we were sitting here and we were starting all this, and DC was doing the whole push, we're talking 2020 Green Lantern movie. We're talking, it's just about a little less than a year away now.
Yeah, and as far as the movie goes, Jeff Johns is working on a script. The original idea they had of. They were describing it as Lethal Weapon in space, and that was the original plot, and they were going for an older Hal and a younger John. That's all been thrown out, and they've started all over again. So Jeff Johns is currently working.
That's not a bad thought, though.
No, I remember some guy who writes a blog came up with that idea.
Yeah, I don't know who. Ryan Mumsey.
Yeah. Only I didn't go with the older Hal, younger John thing. They're about the same age, but whatever. And but anyway, Jeff Johns has a production company that he's working on movies and things, and he's writing the script. So I would be shocked if we see anything about 2020 again. I don't think it's going to be happening in that short of a time frame, because there's not even a script at this point. There's no casting. There's no nothing. So I don't expect to see that in 2020.
At least we got it in good hands.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
Very
true. We hoped, yeah. So Phil, what was your take on Green Lantern, the movie with Ryan Reynolds?
Oh God. I mean, at the time.
Is that, oh God, am I peeling off a scab here?
I mean, at the time when I went and saw it, I remember thinking back, I was all stoked to go. It was a midnight showing, and I got fired up. I even dragged my friends along with me at the time, people I went to school with, and I thought, hey, this is cool at the time, but then after I watched it a second time, I was like, this was not a good movie. And then the third time I watched it, I was like, I'm just not going to watch this anymore. It's terrible. And I've disassociated with myself with it since.
Well, getting on a Green Lantern podcast is probably not as disassociating as you would expect, but Myron and I did the exact same thing. We went to the midnight showing. I think we had our Green Lantern shirts on. I think we were primed. You brought your wife and your son, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I remember your wife, because that was the first time I think I met your wife, and your wife looked at me and was like, "So are you like really big into Green Lantern?" She was like, "Come on, man, it's midnight." And I remember going up to the popcorn counter, and the little snobby teenage girl behind the counter, like one kid was in full Green Lantern garb, and she said some snide comment about, and I held up my hand, and I had the big Green Lantern ring on, and I was like, "These are my people," and she just got bright red. And, first of all, I'm shaking a fist at a teenage girl, which is probably not great, but I'm like holding my Green Lantern ring. I'm like trying to make a construct to like throw her across the concession, but she just kind of like put her head down and was like, "Oh great, who's this guy?" But I think Myron, you and I were jazzed when we walked out of that theater.
Oh yeah, I think anytime I walk out of a movie, I'm always hyped for the film because I just saw it. And for me, this was something I had never envisioned I'd ever see in my lifetime. So you've got that layered on top of it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember the next day I think we did a 3-hour podcast. That was our first podcast. And I think we were all right. But I think, Phil, you hit it on the head. Then you kind of go back and, the flaws start to become a little bit more clearer,
Yeah, at the very least, I don't know. I guess I think about the film at the very least. It's just a product. It's still a product of, I don't know. I can't even describe it. Like, I always think back to what points of the movie that I can actually appreciate. And I think the only one I actually honestly appreciated that whole movie was probably when Sinestro showed up. And that was it, That was the only cool part about that movie that made sense to me, that I was like, okay, now it gets good, And that was it.
Well, I will even say that the one part with Hector Hammond who's the actor's name? Skarsgård? No,
Peter Skarsgård. Yep.
Yeah, Skarsgård. Yeah, when he's sitting there and he throws Tim Robbins on the, he starts breaking out everything. I mean, I was like, okay, this is a very formidable bad guy, and I think there was bright spots to it. I think it was an example of too many hands from outside the comic universe were getting their hands in it, because they were trying to make it something it was not. And in doing so, it kind of ruined it. I mean, and it's a shame because I think there were some bright spots there. I'm still not sold on Ryan Reynolds as Green Lantern.
No, he was a terrible choice to begin with. I mean, he doesn't fit he doesn't fit the trope of Hal Jordan at all. I mean, that's just my opinion, but
No, I would. You now, Myron, you like a younger Hal Jordan.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I wanted a younger Hal. I will say this though, I think it's still better than any of the Thor movies. So.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of like Ragnarok, but I would agree with the first two Thors. Yeah. I would say. And you know what? I mean, honestly, we have it. My son, he'll sit down and watch it, and, I think sometimes there's that, the younger eyes kind of are more forgiving than being an adult trying to watch it. I think, they're like, oh man, this big monster's coming and, it's a big cloud and that's scary to them. But, we're sitting there going, what is that big floating thing? That's Well,
but what does that say about us when we went to see it initially? Because look, we were glazed over when we were watching it then. It's like being a child all over again. It
was also 1 a.m, and I was thumped up on pixie sticks. So, and Myra and I were holding hands the whole time. So, yeah.
But if it wasn't for the movie, we wouldn't have gotten the far superior Green Lantern the animated series.
Which, absolutely, I think that was a good. What is that? About 12 hours of footage, right? There.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was a tight story. That was fantastic. No, that's very good. Now, so Phil, I don't want to pry here, but do you have kids? Do you?
Yeah, I have my boy is 17 years old.
Oh yeah, you like comics?
He doesn't like much of the same stuff that I do. Unfortunately, I see him on the weekends, every other weekends, or like in between the week every once in a while. But I was never married or whatnot, but he lives with his mom most of the time. But no, he doesn't not into the comic book stuff. He watched Aquaman the other day, and he said it was cool. He liked it. He said it was cool. Of course, I'm sitting there going, "Are you kidding me? That's an awesome, amazing movie." But he's just not into the whole. He's not into the whole like we are.
No, yeah, it's funny. It's what I try to get my son just wasn't really into movies in general. It was taking a little while. It was until Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that my son was like, wow, this is a good movie. And then he saw Venom and he was like, that's really good. And then I had to punish him for that. But I'm just doing due diligence as a father.
That's all you can do, right?
Yeah. No, I was going to say, Phil, good talking to you. I never, being the first time, it was, felt like it's been a whole year. So
I felt like we've been catching up on old times. Honestly, it's been a pleasure, Bill. Really.
Yeah, keep up the good work. You guys are doing well. I'm glad to see that the postings are still going up there, and that there's tons of fans on Facebook. I think that's great. If you get any emails or stuff, tell them I say hi. I do check out the Facebook every once in a while. I've been kind of getting away from Facebook and a little bit, but every once in a while I still get in my email like, hey, this person's requesting access to the blog of OA, and looking at the membership now, which is somewhere past 3,000.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. And I will definitely put a link to your book, Monster Carnival, a Comics Anthology, that you have a story in. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, too, so people can find it.
Oh, thank you very much. It's appreciated.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, you have a good night, guys. Enjoy your discussion. Phil, we'll talk again. And Myron, I'll see you tomorrow, actually.
Yep.
So, see you then.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
See you. Bye. Bye-bye.
My name is John Mayo.
And I'm Bob Retall.
What is the Weekly Comics Spotlight?
Comics reviews from two fans with 65 years of combined comics reading experience,
who each get and read well over 100 different comics each month from Marvel, DC, and a wide variety of independent publishers.
Reviews that highlight books that may not hit everyone's radar screen since most people don't buy so many different comics each month.
Reviews with honest opinions. We enjoy comics but realize not every issue that we read is a solid gold masterpiece. all in about 30 minutes. So please check out the weekly comic spotlight at www.comicbookpage.com/podcast.
Well, thanks for Bill for coming on our show. It was nice to have him on as a little bit of a treat.
Yeah, it really was. And it was nice, like, the first time getting to talk to him, after all this time. It was my first interaction with him over the phone. And, he's a great guy. And it was really nice to get filled in on who he was and not just knowing who he was.
Yeah, I forgot that you two didn't get a chance to meet before he left. So that was kind of fun. I decided I would sit back and let you guys interact because you guys haven't interacted before. I see him every day. So
yeah, it was nice. It was really, really good. And honestly, when I was sitting there talking to him, it just felt natural. Like I was just catching up with an old friend. It was cool.
Cool. Well, this week we had Green Lantern issue number 6 hit the stands. Basically, this is the mid-season finale in terms of this 12-issue season. And we see the Controller Mu plot play out in its entirety a little bit. Well, we think its entirety. We think. Yeah, I question whether Mu is actually dead or not. But one note about this book, I interacted with Liam Sharp on Twitter earlier today, and I was asking him about the print version because the print version is different from the digital edition in terms of, when you look at the opening of the book, you see the skies of Rand being very green instead of blue. And you see Alana wearing an outfit in which she's got bare legs and she's got a yellow skirt and a brown pair of boots on. And in the digital version, it's yellow tights and it's a different color scheme altogether. And I asked him what the color difference was, why there were two different sets of color palettes when it came to that stuff. And he basically said that they realized too late to stop the printing that the coloring was off. And so they corrected it for the digital version. And when this series comes out in a collected version, you'll see it with the blue skies and you'll see the color palette changed. So for me, it was when I first did my review, I didn't know that. And I thought, boy, this is really weird. Why did they change her outfit? Why did they change the colors of the skies? But now we know. Nothing major. So what did you think about this issue?
Oh, I think this is one of my favorite issues so far. I like Adam Strange, and I like the interplay with him and Hal Jordan because they've had a long history together.
Oh yeah. Years ago, you used to read Adam Strange backup stories in the Green Lantern book. So Green Lantern fans who were reading back in the day really got a dose of Adam Strange every month.
Yeah, I really liked their interaction, and the thing of it was during that whole point when they were having their standoff with the old gun duel. I was thinking to myself, I know for a fact Hal Jordan's not going to kill Adam Strange. It's not in his character, number one, and he wouldn't do that to a friend, number two, And then when he shot him, it kind of hit me. I was like, okay, wait a minute, maybe he did. And I go, no, there's no way he killed Adam Strange. Thankfully, that's not what took place, but I like the way that interaction took place to sidetrack Controller Mu. That was cool.
Yeah, it was neat to see Hal give Alana that wink, but she was so overcoming grief. I don't know if she connected the dots or not. And you can see when they're getting ready to do that little showdown, Hal kind of tells Adam Strange to be quiet. He kind of shushes him a little bit. And I think it's because he hasn't had enough time with the Black Star gauntlets to really get the kind of control he would have with a power ring, and he's trying to fake Adam Strange's death, and he's got all he can do to try to concentrate to pull it off. And
I think considered that, yeah.
Oh yeah. So to me, I was reading it as, okay, I know he's not going to intentionally do it, but can he pull it off? Can he fake the death?
I did. Yeah, I didn't even think about it that way. I'm glad you pointed that out.
And to me, this goes back to we saw Hal air quote kill someone several issues ago. I'm sure it's the same thing.
Yeah.
That he's not really dead. But I thought it was funny that when Adam Strange was killed and they come in and they want to take his superior pteroid organs and reproductive potency, I kind of chuckled to myself.
Yeah. And dissect it.
Yeah. And then it leads to Hal interacting with Mu. And I thought Grant Morrison did the smart thing in that, typically when you get to this moment in the story, the bad guy monologues and he gets caught off by the ruse of the policeman who's gone undercover. And Moo's smarter than that. And he knows Hal is deceiving him. But what we find out is that they really wanted more than Hal was his power ring, because that's the fourth of the fifth components for their ultimate asset that they were trying to build.
And you have a theory on what asset it is, right? I think I read that in your review.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the Miracle Machine. The Miracle Machine is something that the controllers created, and it's kind of reverse engineering of Owen technology. And, you see in the book, as you read this book, you'll see Beelzebub say things like, black is absolute, and talk about having one unstoppable wish. And to me, that just reeks of Miracle Machine. The Miracle Machine in the controller's native tongue is a word which I'm not going to try to pronounce, but when translated to English, stands for the absolute.
Interesting.
So in my mind, this is Morrison kind of dropping the hints that this was what the ultimate asset was, but when they can't crack it, Moo goes into Plan B and launches the Strangelet, which ironically is not a play on the fact that it's Adam Strange and all that stuff. That's actually a scientific thing, which I thought was kind of cool.
Right, and but then I didn't pick on that either. And then after I read the book. I read your review after I read the book. It's funny because whenever I read your reviews following, they kind of help me pick up on points that I overlooked or whatnot. And that was another one.
So the interesting thing I thought too is, and I don't know if I pointed this out in the review, but when Hal gets told by the Guardians, you got to disarm the U-bomb, there's that one panel where it says total annihilation, and Hal says, now you tell me. And I'm not quite sure whether he's talking to the Guardians, essentially, that you didn't tell me this is what the plot was, or what the now you tell me references. But we see Hal basically try to contain the explosion, and he disappears.
Where do you think and where did he go?
Inside the power ring.
Inside the power ring. Once again, how many trips has he made inside the power ring? Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting here is that Morrison is kind of throwing a couple things out. One is, we know that Hal had a power ring made up of pure will. That's not this ring. And Abin Sur's ring is originally where Hal Jordan encountered Merwidden before. Merwidden is a classic character from, I want to say it was 1964, was when this character originally came out. And yep, and this is obviously a different take. They spell it a little bit differently. They spell it here with an I instead of a Y, and he looks a lot different. But I'm wondering if this is just a different take, or maybe is this the original Merwidden's son or nephew or twin brother, or who knows?
Or more importantly, what kind of ring are we? Do we have Abin Sur's ring back, and what happened to the ring that Hal Jordan made himself, or did it just get thrown out altogether and he's going back to, like you said, the original ring?
Right. It's really hard to say. That's one of the things about Morrison's run is that we're not sure what things are still in continuity and what things aren't. And I guess we just have to kind of accept it and move on. But yeah, originally this took place in Abin Sur's ring, and maybe this is a whole play in that whole story. I think what it sets up is one of the things that people were expecting from Morrison was this very much a character analysis and an introspective story, and I think this sets the stage for that kind of thing to happen.
Yeah, especially with Hal going into the ring like he is.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking forward to see what happens. And do you think Moo is really dead? What's your take on that whole thing?
No, I don't think Moo's gone. I mean, I don't know why he would be, because he's been since the beginning. He's been here since the beginning, and I don't know. I like the character. I really kind of find him fascinating, and I don't see why they would just push him off that quickly. I think they got plans for him. I have a feeling he's going to show up again.
Well, yeah. I mean, there was a couple times in this issue where he said, we are Moo, we are the controller.
Right.
So I don't know whether there's more than one Moo. Is Moo like a collective consciousness?
Or maybe it'll be Controller Vu. The next one. Or Controller Shoe. Who knows? I mean, they might go on to a different controller the next one, maybe. I don't know. These guys haven't appeared before in Lantern Comics, right?
Right, yeah. These are the controllers we've seen, but this is obviously a different take on the controllers.
Right. So, I mean, like we always go back to with Grant Morrison, it's all up in the air because you don't know what. To be honest with you, every book that comes out, I'm not really sure what he's going to be doing. You know, he surprised me with every read. Even when he pulled out Merwin, you know, I was like, at the end, I got to the end, I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, where did he read to come up with the concept of putting him in this book?
Yeah. And it's interesting because Merwin is a character that we haven't really seen since 1988, other than Ethan Van Sciver used him as an Easter egg. He was in a science cell on Oa back in Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps number 22. Obviously, no speaking terms, but you could see him there in his traditional outfit.
But it kind of makes sense with a Morrison type, with a Morrison as a writer. I mean, I don't know if you noticed it with some of the other books, but it seems like there's a reinvention of a lot of older characters coming back, and not just offshoot characters like Merwin, but you're looking at like the Justice Society of America. It just seems like a lot of these older characters that have been out of print for a long time are now coming back to be more in the spotlight.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I don't know. It's just something I picked up on, like Alan Scott. It just seems like the narrative for Alan Scott seems like it's picking up because somewhere along the way, maybe in Doomsday Clock, he's going to appear or whatever the case may be. And then again, you got to think to yourself, what happened to Alan Scott? He hasn't been around that much.
Well, over in Doomsday Clock, they kind of explained it.
Right.
Basically, Dr. Manhattan prevented Alan Scott from getting the lantern in the first place, and so he dies in the train crash. Right.
So, I mean, at one point, are we going to see a return of Alan Scott? Let alone even the Justice Society of America. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of these characters are pulled from the past and they're made relevant again, like Merwin, or like. He kind of looks like Mr. Mixoplick. I think that's what you said in your review.
Well, yeah, I think Merwin is as close as you could get to a Mr. Mixoplick. I got to say it right. But as close to that kind of a character as you can get for the Green Lantern universe. And in the hands of Morrison, I can definitely see it getting more and more that way. Maybe not as over the top as you see Mr. Mixoplick get to be in the Superman books.
Sure.
But there's definitely the potential there. And we can't talk about this book without talking about Liam Sharp and his artwork.
Oh gosh, man. And he just kills it every time. His Adam Strange, I'm completely in love with his Adam Strange. Completely.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like old school Flash Gordon looking, it just looks gorgeous.
Well, and it's funny that you use Flash Gordon as a reference because, last issue we talked about how it seemed to be almost an ode to horror comics. And this is really an ode to the traditional pulp noir type of space fiction. And Flash Gordon is exactly what I thought of when I see this opening sequence.
Yeah, I was the same way. And it's kind of funny because even Bezelbeth, I'm not sure if that, who's the girl with the black hair?
Alana,
right? And Alana reminds me of like a Dale Arden type of character.
Right.
Yeah. This was a great book, and it was all. I love the sci-fi to it. I love the just his art's beautiful, man. I mean, there's just no going other way about his artwork. He fills in everything, and it really makes it look immersive.
There's that one page where Moo is taking up like half the page. And there's so much detail in his character design, and it really stands out. And it's just gorgeous. It's such a beautiful book to look at.
Yeah.
From cover to cover. And one of the things I noticed about Liam Sharp's run on this book, I think other than one panel in the first issue, there has not been a full page spread in any of these issues.
No, you're right. There really hasn't. This one had a lot of drawings of the ring. Did you notice that? It showed up a lot, and I like his detail, how he puts the detail in the lantern ring.
Yeah, and there was some panel layouts that reminded me a lot of Neil Adams too.
And that would make sense. Neil Adams. He worked on it. What years did he work on that?
It was late '60s, early '70s.
Okay, all right. Yeah, this is just his stuff is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Well, what I really like about Liam Sharp's work is that even though some of these issues, each one kind of represents different styles, there's still a consistency across all of them. So it's almost, I don't know, I can't really describe it, but I feel like each book stands alone, but yet they all fit together visually.
And it's funny you mention that, because that Brave and the Bold felt the same way towards me. And with his drawings, and that was my first real getting into Liam Sharp's his artwork was Brave and the Bold, and that's what sold me on the first issue. When I saw the cover of the first issue, I was like, oh, I'm going to get that, because that's gorgeous, and reading that, I felt the same kind of resonance that you felt with what you just said about these books, and each one does feel like a standalone, but it's cohesive at the same time. And his art reflects with just about every background that he gets involved with, no matter what planet he's on, even with Ran,
Yeah. I just think this is a gorgeous book. This is probably my favorite issue of the series. Yet when you kind of flip through it quickly, it doesn't seem like a lot's going on, but there is a lot going on, which I think is a testament to Morrison's writing.
Yeah, I totally agree. On a side note, I'm definitely going to get I like the cover of this, with him, Adam Strange and Hal Jordan on the front. I'm going to get that cover made, but I'm going to get it without any of the title or anything on there. That's going to make for an awesome poster.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm going to high-res that. You know what out of that? No, this was a strong book, and a strong midway point too, because this just catapults it into the next 6 issues and what they're going to do moving forward.
Definitely, and it really takes a twist by taking Hal and essentially air quote killing him by imprisoning him in the ring. It takes this whole book in a different place than I thought it was going to go in.
I agree. I completely agree.
But great issue. Really, really good issue.
Yep, I'm looking forward to the next one. It's going to be cool.
All right, well, let's take a quick pause and come back, and we've got, I think we've got a couple of listener emails to share.
All right, sounds great, Myron.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of OA. You need to keep listening, otherwise I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
All right, well, Phil, we've got a couple of comments from our listeners, and the first one is from Jimmy Snow. And you might recall last episode we were talking about Jimmy Snow, and I was kind of teasing you about whether or not you were actually Jimmy Snow. And Jimmy writes and says, yes, Virginia, there is a Jimmy Snow. I am my own entity, and I'm not an alter ego. Great show again as usual. I really enjoyed the retro episodes, as I also took a break from comics at one point and appreciate direction towards great stories I might have missed. Touching on the last feedback you read in Simon Baz, the one thing I did find done right was he was never a character created for diversity. He was a character created for diversity rather than changing an established character a la Alan Scott for Earth 2, although the Geo Corps is probably the most diverse group in comics. Thanks for sharing your insights on Hal and the gang and the comics and in general with us, and can't wait for the next episode. So, Jimmy, thanks. Thanks, Phil, for writing this. No. I appreciate it. And I like the comment that he says about Simon Baz, is that he was created for diversity rather than changing a character. One of the things I think that people really don't like is when characters that are long established are changed for whatever reason. I think there was a lot of backlash over Alan Scott, not because of the fact that Alan Scott was gay, but because he was changed to be gay. I think that was the problem that people had. And I would much rather see a new character created. What I wish they would do, and this goes back to my at this point I almost sound like I'm ranting about it, but talking about how many Earth Lanterns we have, it almost feels like the creators are sometimes creatively bankrupt, and they're like, well, I've got the idea for a character that represents diversity or represents this group or that group or this gender or this nationality or whatever. But rather than make them stand on their own 2 feet, they're like, well, let's slap Power Ring on them, and that'll make them sell more. And I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go. I understand what they're trying to do, and I think they think, well, if we can attach an existing brand, the character will stick around longer. But at the same time, it creates a divisive environment. And I think if you look at any franchise in comics, Green Lantern Corps has probably got to be one of the most diverse group of characters to begin with. They may not all be human, but they represent all kinds of people. And I think it's up to us as human beings to see beyond the labels and identify with people for what they are and on the inside and not what they are on the outside. But
and that's a valid point.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that makes sense a lot with the Green Lantern Corps, considering there's 3,600 members of different species, you know, in different races and different origins, and you know, and you're right, it is the most diverse group, and I don't like. I think a lot of Marvel over at Marvel failed in that aspect when they started changing the status quo of their characters, like when Thor switched to being female Thor, you know, and it was what's her face, his love interest over there. I forgot her name.
Jane Foster.
But you know, a lot of what I've heard over at the buddy of mine that reads Marvel comics was that, you know, they got in trouble with a lot of their content because they weren't creating diverse characters. They were just changing characters and changing their genders or changing whatever else they wanted to change with their sexual identities, you know. And it's like, you can't just do that willy-nilly, because fans will take that as an insulting. It's an insult to begin with.
Well, look at the backlash over Wally. Right,
exactly. I mean, Simon Baz, while I agree with Jimmy's point, I mean, he was created for diversity. I mean, and it was by Jeff Johns alone. The problem with doing that is it's a shot in the dark, because you don't know what's going to happen to him or her, for that matter, in the end. And lo and behold, we don't even know where Simon Baz is anymore. So if you're going to come out with a character like that, at least have him to where he doesn't disappear, you know, or just doesn't go anywhere. If you're going to have him specifically for the purpose of diversity, let alone you just can't willy-nilly just get rid of them, you know?
Right. Well, I guess I would rather see other characters. You know, I go back to, you know, I think DC has a Green Lantern problem. I also think it has a Flash problem. I mean, how many fastest men on Earth or fastest people on Earth do we have to have?
Right.
Barry Allen is no longer unique, and I think we've done that with a lot of characters and franchises where we've made it too big. Rather than make unique characters, we kind of just use one as a template and regurgitate the same formula. And then what happens is, when maybe that works out great when the franchise is doing really well and it can support 5 books, but then when you get back down to 1 book, now nobody's happy.
Yeah, you're right. Which goes back to my point. I mean, a GL core book would be a great fit right now, but I don't know, whatever.
Yeah,
That's why I'm not at DC, you know?
But Jimmy, thank you for writing back in again. I appreciate it.
Yep. All right, so the next one's from Don. Don says, just a thanks for all the hard work. I read all Myron's reviews online, and they're always well thought out and balanced, and I'd have to agree with that. They really are. I've been reading GL since the Hard Traveling Heroes run of O'Neill and Adams way back. We know we know where that's at. It's great to have a source of information, news, GL stuff, and fantastic reviews. I've known comic book shops, been a part of many defunct podcasts, so I think quality work shows when it stands the test of time and all the changes in the industry. Thanks again for all the work. Well, number one, thanks, Don. That was very flattering. More to you, Myron, because you've been around for this podcast a lot longer than I have. You know, you're the parent, right? You're the dad of it.
And Don, I do really appreciate that. You know, I was looking at the blog the other day. I'm missing some articles still from when I migrated over from Blogger, and I'm spending more time writing new content than fixing the old stuff. But I was looking the other day, and there's over 1,200 articles on the blog of OA, and I've written every one of them myself. It's a one-man show. So I do appreciate that. When I do reviews, I try to be even-handed. I know there's been some reviews where I've really been critical of the book, and usually, you know, for example, I love Marv Wolfman. Well, Marv Wolfman is one of my favorite creators of all time, but he did a book with Hal teaming up with Plastic Man, and it was probably the worst book I've read in the last 20 years.
Wow.
And I think I gave it a 0, which is the first time I've ever. I think it's the only time I gave it a 0. In fact, that review is one of the articles that didn't come over. I gave it a 0. I'll have to restore that review at some point, but it was really bad. And and I try to be even. I try to find the good things in it, but boy, sometimes it's difficult. And I don't want to be. I've tried to consider the blog and the podcast my way of trying to be an ambassador for the franchise, and so I'm trying to embrace it all. But it's difficult sometimes when you either philosophically disagree or you find that it just doesn't match your taste in any shape or form. And I had a really good conversation. I was fortunate to get a chance to meet up with a good buddy of mine over from the Raging Bullets podcast. And we were chit-chatting. I was out in Cleveland, and I had a chance to hang up with Sean Whalen and his wife and go out to dinner. And he and I were talking, and I said to him, how do you maintain the positivity all the time? Because when you listen to their show, they really don't have anything bad to say about anything. And they take some criticism for that too. But his comment to me was, well, I have the luxury of I'm embracing the entire DC universe, so I've got the luxury of only talking about the books I like. So it makes it easy because I'm not going to waste time talking about what I don't like. In my situation, I'm dealing with he may be dealing with a niche market, but I'm dealing with a niche within a niche. So I can only talk about the Green Lantern books and be on target with what our core audience is and what I'm trying to support. And if I don't like it, boy, how do you try to maintain your negativity without coming off like a negative Nelly? And that to me is sometimes the biggest challenge, because while I may not appreciate certain things or certain characters and it may not be my taste, it's somebody else's taste, and I don't want to offend them. I don't want to drive them away. I want to welcome them to the family. But then at the same time, boy, there's some things I just fundamentally disagree with. And I do find myself in an awkward position sometimes. And I try to talk about things without offending anyone. And if I do offend someone, I do apologize in advance, because I try not to. But I do appreciate Don's comments because this is a labor of love, for lack of a better term.
It really is. I mean, and I know enough about technology to know that it's time consuming, and it does use up a lot of space in what we all consider normal busy lives and everything. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's a reprieve from that, even me sitting here with you for an hour and a half every couple of weeks. I love it, and it's fun. I'm thrilled and honored to be a part of it since I've joined a year ago, and I'll do the best I can moving forward. I know I dump on Simon Baz a lot, but I'll be honest with everybody out there. I don't dislike him as a character. I just wish they would utilize him in a better fashion instead of just throwing him wayside because he doesn't fit in any certain mold or whatnot. If you're going to go out of your way to create something, why just disregard it that easy?
Right.
And
right.
As far as everything else goes, I'm not. There's very rarely that I'm that passionate about anything that has to do with the comic book universe that I will trash on anybody else just because I don't believe them. I mean, you and I both know that. I mean, the internet's toxic, and and this whole what's better, DC, Marvel, and stuff like that. It's gotten to the point with me where it's like, let's grow up here, people. There's room for both, and there's room for both to grow. But the minute you start disrespecting that, and the minute you start trashing on it, it's the minute that it starts disappearing, and then you're not going to have it anymore, and then you're going to miss it when it's gone.
True.
So anyway, just a point to consider.
Very much so. So thanks for writing in and being a part of the show. We do appreciate your guys' comments and your feedback. So, Phil, rather than take a break and go out to a commercial and come back and and then close. Why don't we wrap things up, because we've gone on longer than we usually do.
Yeah, we can thank Bill for that.
So we'll be back in a couple.
Good.
Yeah, we'll be back in a couple weeks doing another retro review episode, and I'm glad people likes those. So we'll be back in a couple weeks and do that, and then I think actually in a couple weeks we might be doing our kickoff for the big Blackest Night event. I've got to double check the timing on that. But
it's coming up.
Yep, definitely. So until next time, please treat each other well, keep your power rings charged, and make every day your brightest day.
We'll see you guys later.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.